Hi, my name's Liz Scarf and welcome to this channel where I am exploring concepts of cultural repair and how to do this in a collaborative way. This is part 3 of a 5-part series about how to do cultural repair, and I'm laughing because if you haven't seen the first 2, you wouldn't know, but it's completely ridiculous to kind of go, here's 5 steps to doing cultural repair, because cultural repair is so complex, so subjective. It's really quite ridiculous. And it's a useful framework to start thinking about what are some of the really core things that we think are sort of fundamentally relevant to cultural repair. And so these are 5 that occur to me at the moment that I think are really fundamentally important, and that could change in 6 months' time, 6 weeks' time, but they're what I'm sitting with at the moment. And this is number 3. Now, as with all of these videos, this content might be super helpful and useful for some people, and then for others it could be completely irrelevant and even insulting. So it's going to depend on your life experience, the kind of privileges you have. But if you kind of watch this and you think, are you kidding me, then this wasn't actually for you. It's not input that is relevant to you, right? But it is relevant to a lot of people, because a lot of people struggle with this, myself included. So here's step 3. It's do your best to grow up. Now, there's a reason why I'm saying do your best, which I'll get to later. But firstly, I want to talk about what do I mean by growing up and why is it relevant to cultural repair. So one way to think about our inner psychology, and lots of different approaches have a similar kind of structure. They might name it differently and whatever, but is to think that there are like 2 main sort of drivers or roles or selves, right? And in process work, where I come from, a modality I kind of mostly draw from, we talk about big you and little you. So I'm going to describe these sort of roles or drivers in very basic terms. The little you, right, this part or drive or way of being, right, it lives for the moment because it thinks it's going to live forever, it's never going to die. So it's a little delusional about the nature of reality and embodiment, and there's no consequence-based thinking in this sort of part of identity. It also can't do delayed gratification. It wants to feel good now all the time, and it doesn't care what the cost is. Like, it's not thinking costs. Again, no consequence-based thinking. And it thinks life should be easy all the time, and if things are hard, it's like it's a problem and there's a tantrum going to happen, and it's not okay. This is also where addictions and compulsive sort of tendencies and behaviours sit as well, an inability to kind of stop when we've had enough, or stop or not go past a certain point where things will be, there'll be a big cost. And this role actually doesn't care about our well-being, fundamentally our long-term well-being, short-term well-being. It doesn't care. It cares about having a good time, and it's delusional about the nature of, as I said, reality, that our body has needs, and of our own mortality. It lacks, as I said, the adult capacity for consequence-based thinking, and also doesn't understand that life is a mixed bag of ease and challenge, perhaps, or that hard work can be satisfying. It doesn't get that actually we need meaning in our lives, not just dopamine hits. Now, this role, actually, when we think about it too, right, it's like this role is continually reinforced by the dominant mainstream narratives of Western culture, right? So neoliberal capitalism continually markets the message that life should be easy and fun all the time, and if it's not, if your life's not easy and fun, there's something wrong with you, and that you can also fix it by buying stuff or by getting dopamine hits, right, to get easy fun or easy relief. And more money and more power can be taken from an immature, infantilized population, because we will swap it in a heartbeat for a momentary dopamine hit, because we do not know how to feel kind of well in a very grounded, sustainable way. Culturally, we are not grown up. So it makes us more vulnerable, right? So what does it mean to grow up? I mean, big question. There's going to be lots of different answers on that are all going to be kind of right in their own context, right? Here's some of the things that I think of as growing up and the kind of ways in which I've worked on or tried to learn, not getting it all the time, to grow up, right? One is about accepting limits, especially in our body, understanding that our bodies need sleep, that they are really impacted by mood-altering substances or foods, right? That overworking them has a price. Not moving enough has a price. Too much screen time has a price. Like that there is actually just a fundamental physiological limit. And we don't understand this in Western sort of neoliberal culture, right? And that's how we treat the planet as well, right? As if it has no limits. And of course, climate change is coming in like a massive chronic body symptom to say, hey, yeah, there are limits and consequences for not tidying up after yourself and not treating yourself well. So I think this body-planet thing is exactly the same pattern. So we actually have to challenge our own sort of delusion about unlimited capacity, about unlimited tolerance or resilience. It's just not true. We don't have an unlimited capacity for work or stress or shit food, and accepting our mortality, right? Being really real, that we're not going to be here forever. And so what does that really mean about how we're going to use our lives? And in this, right, it connects to another part of adulting, I think, that is, or growing up, right, which is around boundaries, is around learning to do boundaries in yourself and with others. It doesn't mean, and growing up doesn't mean you can't have fun, but it's about having boundaries to fun that take care of what happens the next day, right? Like just say, I'm like, yeah, I really want to watch some TV tonight. And if that little you in me was the one who was like getting to set the rules, right? It would just be like, I can watch as much as I want. I'm going to watch TV until I fall asleep in front of it at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Forgetting that I actually have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to start my work day, right? That is someone who is not taking care of the future consequences and doesn't care about my well-being, because the rest of the next day, maybe 2 days, I will feel like crap, right? So it's like, yeah, I want to watch TV, great. I think an hour would be okay, or I could watch 2 episodes of the show I want to watch, and then I need to go to bed because I have to get up at 5:30. So you can have fun, but having the boundaries, right, that's growing up. Also dealing with addictions and compulsive sort of tendencies, and it's so incredibly difficult. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but I would say especially culturally endorsed addictions like sugar, which includes really highly processed carbohydrates as well, like really highly processed carbohydrate diets are hugely mood altering and make us really vulnerable to this kind of little you compulsive, give me the next dopamine hit, because we're constantly on these really wretched mood roller coasters, and so we're needing things to kind of keep us up. So actually getting off some of these really quite addictive and mood altering patterns of substance use, and coffee and alcohol sitting there as well, right? And I'm not saying you can't have any of these things, right? But getting really real about, the impact of these things that are so culturally normalised as okay, but they have a huge impact on our capacity to adult, actually. Another one I think is important is recognising that actually having meaning in your life matters, and finding meaning in challenge and suffering is also enriching. It's not actually, it's not only bad to have to suffer. And I'm really cautious about saying that, because some people have suffered so much, and a lot of the suffering people have endured, they shouldn't have to have endured. It's not okay. But it's like, if you have suffered, what are you going to do with that? And that kind of failure to accept, okay, I've suffered, what am I going to do with that? And instead staying in a position of, it should never have happened, it should never have happened, it should never have happened, it's unfair, blah, blah. That's really true, but to stay only there will stop you growing up. So leaning into how do we transform suffering and challenging and hardship, and understanding that that's also quite connected to finding meaning in life at times as well. Like the idea that you could just be happy and life would be easy all the time will stop you growing up. The other one I wanted to mention, I know this is turning into a long video, but is about taking projections back. And what do I mean by that? I think the best way to explain it is like an example, right? Like, let's say, okay, this is a real life example from my own relationship. many years ago, in the early days of this relationship I'm in, I might be emptying the dishwasher, and then I have this internal narrative where I was really irritated at my partner that they hadn't emptied the dishwasher because I was doing it now. I didn't like doing it. I did all the housework around here, right? They weren't doing enough. Now, the reality of it is my partner does more housework than I do. But what was happening in those moments was I was making myself do something I really didn't want to do. And so I crossed my own inner boundary around it, and then I projected that onto them as if they were the one at fault and blamed them for it. So taking back the projection in that example would be like me going, I notice I'm blaming my partner and making up a story about them not doing enough housework. I actually know that not to be true. I must be doing something that I don't want to do. I've gone past my own boundary and I'm making it their fault because I'm having trouble not emptying the dishwasher when I don't want to do it. And so I had to learn, you don't want to empty the dishwasher? Don't empty it. Just leave it until you feel like it, until you feel like okay to do it. And it'll get done eventually, no problem. And that's a taking back of a projection. And we do it all the time in a relationship. It's so hard not to do it. And it's a really, really important part of growing up, I think, is kind of really taking back the way in which our own internal edges and struggles get projected onto other people as their fault or their responsibility to fix. Another, and this is like a pathway, right? There's so many pathways to sort of grow up, right, internally. One of them is getting good at conflict. Not only is it a really good adult skill, right, but the process of getting there is really helpful for growing up and for provoking your own inner kind of childhood wounds and all kinds of stuff. So that can be a rich journey, not for everyone, right? Learn delayed gratification is another thing. Like you see something at a shop you really, really want, it's like teach yourself to come back the next day and leave it, or, notice. There's lots of different ways to work on that. And then there's these are some ideas about what it means to grow up. Of course, there's lots of others as well. And even though I think in the moment, I'm just thinking of a bunch of others that are really important. But, you just find lots of different paths with that. And I want to circle back to why do I say do your best, right? I say do your best to grow up because it's not easy to grow up if you're in a culture that continually sells immaturity. And if your social circles are also like that, right? If that's what you're surrounded by, it's very hard to do it because our tendency to kind of fit in with the dominant culture around us, even if that's a subculture within the dominant culture, right? Our tendency to try to fit in, it's just so unconscious and so natural and normal and really healthy that it can be really hard to actually grow up. And it usually means we will need to change the people we're hanging out with, actually. It's like we need to find some people, groups where others are also trying to work on this. I remember reading about Adrienne Marie Brown, right, the author. She's the author of a few books, but Emergent Strategy was one I really, really liked. And she talked about setting up this really great online social media group about sugar addiction. We just kind of invited people who also really wanted to relate around and share their journeys around how to quit sugar and how to kind of be in different relationship to sugar, right? And it's like getting community like that. That's one example, right, of how to find community, people who are also trying to grow up in similar ways that you are, right? Because it's just hard if you're embedded in a culture that's not doing it. So that's why I say do your best. It's not easy. And it's not like it's a thing you do once and then you're done. I think it's an ongoing, lifelong process, right? Because what does it really mean to grow up? Being an adult is a different experience over our lifetime. So it's not like an end goal necessarily. But I do think it's really crucial in cultural repair because it's a real question of autonomy. If you don't grow up psychologically, you actually don't really have much autonomy. Your own personal power, it's really, really low. So I think that personal autonomy and capacity to really be in contact with your own inner power is really connected to the capacity to kind of grow up psychologically and, be the boss of your own psyche a little bit more rather than having addictive, compulsive, immature culture be the boss of your identity? Okay, possibly makes no sense. I hope it does. Feel free to share in the comments different ways in which you grapple with growing up, or that you understand that, or ways in which you've found really helpful to find a more sort of powerful, grounded way to be in the world. Love to hear about it. Okay, thanks. Bye.